Welcome to the Reinventing Education podcast. My name's Rob McLeod. Here on the podcast, we believe there are three types of school. You're a fit for one, and the other two probably less so. Joined as always by Brendan O'Leary. How are you today, Brendan?
I'm not bad, Robert. And yourself?
Doing quite well. So with this idea of the three types of school, we say expert, coach, and counselor. If you're new to that, go back to episode 124, titled Start Here. We'll give you the whole Coles notes on exactly what we're talking about. But today we're going to look at the three very different teaching and staff ethoses, or what it feels like to be a part of the three different types of staff, those being the expert, coach, and the counselor. So we're going to focus in on the counselor, as we've already had episodes on the expert and coach, but let's do a quick summary first to bring everyone up to speed so we're on the same page. If we're looking at three different types of teaching and staff ethos or culture, let's begin with the expert. What does it feel like to be part of a expert coach staff when it's being done well?
So if we look at the staff body, the and how they relate to each other, one of the ways to think of it is it's almost like a sense of family. It's very close friends or family, some really deep connections and bonds, and this sense of belonging. It's real feeling on a personal level that you belong here in this group. Alongside that, harmony is really important, and that harmony allows us to build a shared sense of trust, a really strong sense of trust, which in turn allows us an autonomy. Because we can trust everyone to take their responsibilities and do their duties, we can all rely on each other. Therefore, we can give people that freedom and space because we know that harmony and that those strong bonds will continue. In terms of the head of the school, the principal or the head teacher, often that the relationship is one of almost they're the head of the family, and there's a friendly respect between the levels of the hierarchy. If we then move over to the coach-centered approach, we might start to look at more of a team and how we relate to each other more as professionals, or each one of us plays our part. On a personal level, you can feel part of this team and a shared sense of accomplishment as you meet each of the team goals. At its core, rather than that harmony, now we're looking at a compromise to achieve our goals, where disagreement is okay as long as you're applying your logic and backing up with data. Then your voice will be listened to, and then the relationship there with the head of the school becomes a little bit more like that to the CEO of the company or the lead coach of your team. They're going to guide you, they're going to give you advice and feedback, just in the same way that you as a coach teacher does that with your student. But as we move into the counselor-centered approach, Rob, what might the ethos be in that school?
Yeah, so we've gone from family feeling of the expert to a team of professionals with the coach. Here in the counselor, we've got more of a sense of like a collective or an intentional community. And the big difference here, I guess, is just that everyone you could see as being peers. Everyone are equals here. We've flattened a hierarchy. So it's a very different kind of a feeling. And we've gone from shared sense of belonging or accomplishment now into a personal and shared feeling sense of really being authentic. And we're moving towards wholeness now. So people on staff no longer need to play a role, as I would say is more the case with the previous two. Here we can really bring your whole self and self-actualization into the school, which leads to empathy. Now, of course, we're not saying the previous two don't have empathy, but we're just saying that is enhanced here. As well, with this kind of more authentic or more of yourself being able to be brought to the table, there are just simply more needs that can be addressed. There's less of you that you need to edit out. And as we've discussed in, I think, our last two episodes, we talked about the idea of the head of school, or those, at the top of the hierarchy, having maybe kind of a paternal head of a family feel or a CEO feel. Well, here there's potentially no one person in that role. There might be no one head of school, as we've discussed. So everyone is a peer, and everyone who's willing to show up and do the work can hold a part of the shared responsibility for the leadership of the school. It's no longer bestowed, just to one or a few people within the staff structure. So those are the differences. We're looking at the sense of a collective in the counselor school, this personal and shared feeling of being able to be self and not have to edit parts of yourself out, and this idea of everyone being an equal peer and everyone taking on shared responsibility for the whole school, not just a section of it. So what are some of the good things about this, Brennan? What are some of the babies of this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we set out there is that all three of these are good in their own way and bring very different types of goodness. Whether it's that trust, whether it is that feeling that you're achieving your goals, and now with the counselor-centered approach, we can have that sense that, as you mentioned, we can really be honest and bring all the facets of ourself. We don't have to parcel off the school self and the self that's doing our English class and the self that plays on the sports team and all these different kind of parts that maybe we couldn't really express fully. Now, because the self is at the center of this type of learning, this type of school, it's really important that you're actually honest and bring all the parts of yourself. Without feeling that it diminishes the team or will lead you to any sort of exclusion. To the contrary, the more you're honest, the more you participate, the more you'll be accepted, the more that it will actually allow everybody else to do the same thing. So that shared sense that everyone can be themselves and be honest and be true. You don't have to worry about disrupting the harmony, because by hiding parts of yourself, you're not being authentic and true. And that this type of school wants you. So if the cost of that is a little bit of disruption and a little bit of harmony lost, but with the gain of you being able to meet your deeper needs and as a collective, as a group, meet our needs, well, life isn't all sunshine and roses, right? So we do have to sometimes, dig into those more difficult situations to meet those needs. And then this type of school says that's okay. That's necessary for your growth as a person and for us as a community. And then again, we said that deeper sense of empathy. Yeah, of course, there's empathy in all the other types of school, but this type of school puts it at the center. It's like we're spending time with each other, really getting to the bottom of our needs, which can be very messy, can be very, it involves you being, sharing parts of yourself that you wouldn't necessarily in other types of school. And so that shared sense of empathy within the whole community. If that's resonating with you, then this type of school is probably a really good fit. However, Robert, as with all of these things, it's not all good and it's not always good for everyone. So what is the bathwater?
Yeah, so everything has its drawbacks. Here, I would say the largest one is that by bringing all that wholeness you were just talking about, that self-actualization, that may compromise or step on the foot of someone else's wholeness or self-actualization. So one just small anecdote could be, you, perhaps Brennan, you like a dark, quiet room. Whereas myself, I like a bright, loud room for doing my learning in. So if we're having to share a learning space, obviously we can negotiate that. We can try to sort this out between the two of us. But in, sort of more extreme versions, as I'm searching for authentic expressions of myself, it's not to say that that's not going to come in conflict with someone else's. If we're each trying to have our needs met, at some level, some needs are going to trump others or else, result in some sort of back and forth conflict. Taken to a more extreme, there is a risk of the center of gravity of the school swaying into unhealthy places. And what we mean by that is here we have no one person in a role of authority or no concentration of authority across some roles, but rather we have the whole school community. And the simple fact is some communities are healthier than others. And if we're going by kind of the mean, median, or mode, or kind of the center of gravity of a group is what's going to really be pulling things here, there's always a chance that, when shared across the group, perhaps we get pulled into less helpful or less beneficial spaces by what the group as a whole is deciding versus where maybe a few clear-headed people could take an organization. There's also we run the risk, of course, with any of these three, but especially this one, of a coup or someone kind of rising to be a bit of a leader when people get frustrated when dealing with this kind of shared sociocratic, democratic, negotiated way of decision making. At some point, people will run up against this feeling of, I wish this could just be done faster. And we kind of run this risk of, kind of the cult leader speaking for the group or kind of a rising out of it. And again, this is the most extreme, but we are saying this is a concern of this for sure. And then there's also just the case of like, what do you do if someone just isn't playing by the rules? Like you've got all these decision-making processes set up. You've got these sociocratic measures and practices in place. But what about when you have someone who is just either toxic or, has these horrible interpersonal skills and just simply refuses to play by the rules, but is still a part of the community? How do you handle that? What immune system do you have in place to deal with this? And finally, connected to that, perhaps, is just without that kind of leadership or that CEO or that paternal feeling, that lack of a family or team feeling can be possibly destabilizing for some, as we don't have someone to turn to when there is a time for really tough decisions or we need a tiebreaker or, we've done all the processes, but we just can't find consensus or things we can consent on. That can be destabilizing and possibly lead to some of those other bathwaters I was just discussing.
Absolutely. As with any of these things, it's if it sways too far in one direction, it's going to become unhealthy. And yeah, I'm sure schools who are working in this way already, as we've said a bunch of times, there's not that many out there. Maybe we've looked at some sociocratic schools, but they're gonna run against these issues. And we have seen, through circles of decision making and so on, they do try to put processes in place to make sure that there's still those checks and balances and that there's still, it isn't just everybody's battling against each other to see whose needs are met first in its most unhealthy version. So yeah, there's lots to think of there in this type of school, arguably. As things like inquiry learning, project-based learning, and having students really express their own ideas and answer their own questions, this kind of school does fit well with that sort of approach to learning. So interested to see if in the year 3035 might have this in more schools, or even
Yeah.
2025. We can dream, Rob? We can dream.
And as you've been listening, perhaps you've thought, like, oh, which of these three do I align with most? And it'd be curious for everyone listening to this, whether teacher, leader, parent, student, to think, which of these three do I align with most? And which of these three represents my school right now? And to what degree am I in alignment or misalignment with that? And what are the consequences of it? And if you're interested to continue that conversation on, feel free to reach out to us. Reinventing Education Podcast at gmail.com. Find us on social media. We also have an Instagram page as well under Reinventing Education Podcast.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Brendan.